Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is The Surge Effect, and I'm your host, Mike Surge. This podcast will be talking about anything and everything, life in general to current events and past events, and all things about this beautiful and wonderful world that we live in. And this podcast, well, it'll probably have an effect on you. Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of The Surge Effect. Before we get started on today's podcast, I just want to mention two of our sponsors today. First sponsor is Love My Legs Own Sound Grey Bruce. Click on their link below, go right to their Facebook page, and check out all their products that they have to offer. Different size waistbands for the ladies, and they are the only lifetime guarantee in the business. Go check them out. Our second sponsor is He-Shirts, She-Shirts. He-Shirts, She-Shirts are more than just a t-shirt company. Click on their link below and check out everything they have to offer as well. Before we get started as well, I wanted to also mention, like I always do, there's a couple items that I use. The first one is the 8.6 Zoom recording piece of equipment that I used before I switched over to my Rodecaster Pro, which I use now. I'm going to put both of them in the links below, the Rodecaster Pro 2, as well as the 8.6 Zoom. Links below takes you right to the link where you can purchase those two items. The Rodecaster Pro 2 is phenomenal. Really, really great piece of kit for doing vlogging or podcasting. All right, let's get into it. So, this podcast is about carbon tax. So carbon tax, we've been hit in Canada here about 4 different times. Yesterday was a big April Fool's joke on us because we got hammered with the Trudeau's carbon tax. So what's really weird about the whole thing is when you think about Canada or North America in regards to carbon tax. I'm just going to play a couple of videos here and kind of show you. So the first video I'm just going to show you, and I'm going to talk as it's playing a little bit. It's a very brief little video, just about Canada. And I'm just going to pop it up here. And like I said, once it's playing, I will talk you through a little bit. So there's our beautiful Canadian flag, of course. Canada, we are the second largest country in the Western Hemisphere. The largest in the Western Hemisphere and the second largest in the world next to Russia. Of course, we have huge national parks. It's 9,984,670 square kilometers. And like I said, we're the second largest country in the world next to Russia. So, with that being said, you think to yourself, what a massive country that we have, and who pays carbon tax in North America? What country in North America pays carbon tax? Well, give you an example. I'm just going to pop up a little picture here, and this is let's make it a little bit bigger here for you. Give you an idea, and maybe you can read what I also put in there. That the carbon pricing schemes are either in the form of carbon taxes or emissions. Trading schemes, or an ETS in the case of carbon tax. So it's emission trading schemes, that's ETS. Policymakers impose an implicit tax, example a price, on carbon emissions, and then let emitters decide how much carbon they want to emit, example the volume. These taxes are similar to implicit taxes on pollution, such as excise fuel tax, but focus more on changing behaviors rather than generating more revenue for the government. Now, pay close attention to Canada here. Of course, we're in the green. Regional tax, that's our federal tax for this carbon tax. Quebec, as you see, is in the blue. Quebec is right here, and they don't pay carbon tax like we do. They pay an ETS tax. They pay that emissions trading scheme tax. But they should pay like we, but they don't. But, of course, they voted in the House to make us all pay, but they don't. It's kind of shitty if you ask me. But you can look at the rest of that map, and you'll see who pays and who doesn't, and what the legends mean. Of course, the Trudeau government, they keep saying about who pays and what they get back in rebates and all this stuff. So there's the money that the carbon tax costs the average working Canadian by 2030. Alberta, 2,282, Manitoba, 1,145, Saskatchewan, 1,464, and Ontario, 1,461. So it gives you a bit of an idea of why in North America only us Canadians pay. I don't quite understand why we get stung with that. But there's another little map I threw up there. Carbon tax, of course, is a bit of a wider range of there's Canada, of course, we pay. U.S. and Mexico do not. It just frustrates me because it's just maddening that happens. But I'm going to explain to you a little bit about carbon tax with some science and a little bit of math. But before I get started on this first video by this guy's an MIT scientist, his name's Richard Lindzen. I put him on podcasts in the past. I want to ask you a question, and I'll tell you at the end of this video. Do you know what percentage of carbon is in our atmosphere? And it's been that way for decades. All right. Let you think about that for a bit, and at the end of the podcast, I will let you know with one of these videos. You will see it. So, but first I want to play this one video. It's this MIT professor, scientist Richard Lindzen. Like I said, I played him in previous podcasts, but this is pretty self-explanatory.
One asks about, is the temperature increasing or decreasing? It's always doing one or the other. I have no concern about that. By asking people to worry about whether it's going up or down, you're immediately establishing dishonesty. The Earth is always changing. Climate change is nothing you have to prove. It always is happening. It always has happened. So to make that into something alarming seems to me a little bit weird. Sea level is a hard thing to measure, actually. At any given place, traditionally, sea level was measured by what are called tide gauges. A stick in the water, basically. And two things change what a tide gauge shows. The land moving up and down, and the sea moving up and down. Most places, it's the land that is the biggest effect. So you don't have a good measure of sea level rise. On the other hand, for the last 30 years or so, we've had satellite measurements that are actually measuring sea level. It's very hard to relate these two measurements to each other. They're measuring different things. The general feeling is there is no evidence that it's different now than it has been for the last few thousand years. It's been slowly rising ever since the initial rapid rise after the deglaciation 12,000 years ago.
Okay, so that's the MIT professor. And my next one I'm going to show you is another professor, is doctor and scientist, Dr. Don Easterbrook.
To begin with, I need to say who I am, primarily because there has been a lot of politics injected into science these days. And so I am simply a geologist with 50 years of expertise and research in global climate change all over the world. I'm a lifelong environmentalist. I am a scientist. I'm not political. I don't have any particular bias towards either party, so I have no political agenda. I'm not associated with or funded by any business group. I'm not a shill for big oil, big coal, big anybody. All of my research has been funded by governmental agencies. And I'm currently working actively with an international group of geologists, atmospheric physicists, meteorologists, astrophysicists, oceanographers, and field experts, and other scientists in various parts of the world. That's where I'm coming from. I thought I might start by listing some things that you probably don't know about or haven't heard about because the news media isn't telling you. And I've listed a few of them here. There are a lot more, but some things that I will touch on later in the presentation. and that is that global warming ended in 1998. That may come as a surprise, but I'll show you the data for it. And it is indeed true, and that has been admitted by the chairman of the UN group that has been pushing CO2 as causing climate change. Even he admits there's been no global warming in 15 years. The Antarctic ice sheet is not melting. Contrary to headlines you'll see about every other day that the Antarctic ice sheet is melting at an accelerating rate. It not only is not melting at an accelerating rate, it's not melting at all. The main ice sheet, and I'll show you the data for this, is in fact growing, not melting. So we don't need to fear that the ice caps are going to suddenly melt and cause all kinds of problems for us, because they aren't. Sea level has been rising globally and also locally at a rate of about 7 inches per century as we thawing out from Little Ice Age, which occurred about 500 years ago. And the projections are anywhere from 5 feet to 20-foot rise of sea level, as you'll see when I present the data, is beyond reality. Snowfall is not below normal. There have been headlines from time to time about in the Cascades, certainly, that the snowfall in the Cascades is diminishing because of global warming. That's not true. For the past 5 years, have set snowfall records, both globally and in the Cascades. CO2 cannot possibly cause global warming. That will come as a shock to you, I'm sure. And the reason is that there's so little of it. It is a trace gas. It has increased in its atmospheric content by only 8/1000ths of 1%. If you double nothing, you still get nothing, and I'll comment more about this later. Severe storms are not more frequent than normal. When we get a big snowstorm in the east, they say, oh, it's because of global warming. When we hear about a hurricane on the East Coast, they say it's because of global warming. It isn't. And I will show you data that shows that actually the extreme events, severe storms, are actually declining. They're not becoming more frequent. And finally, you may be surprised to know that the oceans are farther. If we go back 500 years, this graph shows essentially temperature on the left-hand side and the year AD on the bottom. Each one of these red peaks is a warm period. Each one of the blue peaks is a cool period. Climate is not constant. It's changing all the time, and it changes in cycles, warm, cool, warm, cool, warm, cool, with about a 30-year time span between each one. So we could count these warm periods, and we can count 20 periods.
So he goes on
to begin with, I need to say who I am, primarily because
he goes on to explain a little bit more in detail, but I just don't want this podcast to go on forever. But you get the idea what he's talking about, that scientist there. Here's another guy that was on the Patrick Bet-David podcast, and he had some interesting things to say, and I'd like to play this for you as well.
This is according to NOAA. This is an actual chart, and the Biden administration's up on their website, showing Earth's history much hotter than today, and this is a quote from the NOAA website. Past temperatures much too warm for ice sheets or perennials. Exactly what I'm saying. And they go back 500 million years. Now you can argue about that, and but that if you're going to accept the other science, you got to look at this.
I agree.
And you see the blue chart. That's today. That's an idea. Now, if you go again, I think I have the UN chart, but I don't know that I do. Yes, this was in the first United Nations report in 1990. Look at the medieval warm period. Showed it as warmer than today. This is important because this is what Elon Musk is using and what you brought up. We had a scientist named David Deming, University of Oklahoma, come testify before the United States Senate Environment Committee in that after that 1990 UN report, which this chart was featured in the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the gold standard, if you will, that the UN scientists started an email campaign and started contacting, we have to get rid of the medieval warm period. Why would a climate activist scientist chosen to work with the United Nations want to get rid of the medieval warm period? Well, because if current temperatures are not as warm as the medieval warm period, it's hard to scare the public about it. So that led to this is a chart exaggerating trend, global temperatures in 8.
He literally said it's hard to scare the public with it. Did you catch that? Yeah.
1880. We always hear, this is done by the Greenpeace co-founder Patrick Moore, who's now a big climate dissenter, if you will. But that's showing you the global temperature, and I believe that's tenths or half a degree. the key here is when they claim that things have gone skyrocketing or unprecedented, the hottest year on record, the hottest decade, it's within tenths, hundredths of a degree, not even measurable. It's within the margin of error, within the margin that they adjust the temperatures. It's a fancy way for them to say, 2006 is the hottest year on record, but it's not statistically different from 2005 or even sometimes it was 1998. So essentially it turns into the last 25 years, we haven't had, since late 90s, we had very little warming. But then if you go back to the 1970s where they started a lot of the baselines, we've had a lot more warming because that was a little ice age. If you keep going...
So you get the idea about the different perspectives of what these people do, right? I have these scientists and professors and teachers and just, reporters as well, what they have to bring forward to the table and stuff that you have probably never seen or heard, or maybe you've never even thought of. I don't know. I don't know where your stance is on global warming or on, paying all this extra money for carbon tax and stuff like that. I'm not sure where you stand on it. But I'm going to play another little clip. This is a little quick clip of another scientist and what he has to say.
Our satellite data show the Earth is warming at about a rate of 1.5 degrees C per century. That's a warming that has happened in the geologic past, certainly. And it is a warming rate that is much more gradual than the dire predictions that tend to dominate the media.
Stuff that tends to dominate the media. Interesting. So here's John Stossel. He did a little story on it as well. And he asked some questions and just asking questions, throwing shit out there. And here he is.
You've heard the news. 97% of scientists agree.
Climate change is getting worse. Carbon could cost us the planet. Just look out the window.
Look out the window? Because it's a hot day and her tiny piece of the world? How shallow is that? And what does it mean when we hear...
The debate is settled.
97%.
97%.
97% of scientists agree.
Of course I believe in global warming.
Pat Michaels is called a climate change denier. But he agrees that the globe is warmed.
97% of scientists agree that global warming is real and people have something to do with it.
Climate change.
Climate changes.
Temperature's up 4 degrees since what's called the Little Ice Age, hundreds of years ago, and up 2 degrees over the past century. The real question is it dangerous? Is it going to harm people?
Exactly.
There's not a 97% consensus on that?
Of course not. There is not a consensus on that. So that's interesting. Just different takes from different people looking at look at this whole climate thing a different way. Here's another scientist. His name is Ian Plimmer, and he is from Australia. And this is what he has to say. Just going to pop it up here.
I know this is going to surprise you, but we've just come out of a little ice age. What do you think temperature's going to do? Fall or rise? It's been rising since the Maunder minimum more than 300 years ago. So it is no surprise that if you have cut-off times for temperature or for sea level or for hurricanes or whatever, you can spin whatever yarn you want to spin. These 6 great ice ages started when we had more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than now. We have 0.04% of that gas in the atmosphere.
Did you guess that? Did you guess 0.04? Did you guess that?
And we hear words like emissions. Well, that means nothing to me because the atmosphere has changed in its carbon dioxide content from over 20% to now, which is really low in geological time. If we halved it, all plant life would die and animals would die.
And animals would die. And human beings would die. Because plants need our offshoot of what we expel, which is carbon. And they take that carbon dioxide and then they give us back oxygen. It's quite the reciprocal exchange between nature, obviously, and human beings. So Ian Plimmer there, he was just saying about the point 0.04 in the atmosphere. So this is interesting because this is a senatorial hearing, and this was actually March 28th, just a few days ago. And this question was put towards the panel that they were being asked questions. So here we go.
Mr. Chairman, panelists, let me just go right down the line real fast. What percent of our atmosphere is CO2? Take your best guess. You don't have to be accurate. All down the line.
Repeat that question.
What percent of our atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide? Wild guess. It's okay.
I'll buy 5%.
5?
I'll just follow you.
We'll get 7. That's my favorite number.
I'll see their 5 and suggest that we know that transportation causes 49% of CO2, so that's why we're all working on energy transition.
All right. So what number do you think it is?
5.
5? How about you? I didn't hear you, Mr. Dreyer.
7.
7. Did you have one, Mr. Boyd?
So we got a 5, 7.
Price is right.
8. I'm gonna get the high end.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and I don't mean to I put you on ice. I ask a lot of people that because all we hear is climate change, CO2, CO2. I heard a couple of you on the panel saying you're looking to change your vehicles to electric, even though we don't have the electric grid. And me as a farmer, I wouldn't be real happy about running out and replacing $300,000, $500,000, $1 million pieces of equipment because someone wants it to be electric. The answer is 0.04%.
Once again, 0.04%.
Not 1%, not a half of a percent. It's 0.04%, and it's gone up from 0.03 over the last couple decades. This is what we're being all contorted into doing: is this tiny change in CO2. If we get below 0.02, plant life starts dying off. So
once again, plant life starts dying off. Plant life dies off. Then what? No oxygen, no animals, no humans. It's crazy. This is what Vivek Ramaswamy, when he was doing the debates with everyone, this is what he had to say in regards to climate change. You may or may not have heard what he had to say, but this is what he said.
Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax. And we have to declare independence for it. And the reality is, the anti-carbon agenda is the wet blanket on our economy. And so the reality is, more people are dying of bad climate change policies than they are of actual climate change.
So that was Vivek Ramaswamy, and man, he took some heat from that. It's craziness. So I'm going to get you one more thing here just before I sign off. Math and science. People always say, follow the science. You got to follow the science. You also got to follow a little bit of math as well as science. So what absorbs CO2? If you don't know what absorbs CO2, it is greenery, trees, swamps, bugs, marshes, all that fun stuff. So I just put a little clip together here, and I am going to show you and explain to you as I go what it has to say. So here we go. How much does a tree absorb of CO2? 48 pounds of it. The absorption rate based on the trees, species, age of life, blah, blah, blah. It steps towards reducing the carbon footprints, obviously, because it absorbs CO2. Now you start doing some math and you go, well, how much does Canada put out every year of CO2? Well, right there it's over 500 million tons. Well, Canada, we have 318 billion trees. So if you have 500 million tons of CO2 per year created by Canada, and then you take that number, which is 1 ton equals 2,000 pounds. So there's 500 million tons multiplied by 2,000 equals 1 trillion pounds. So if there are 318 billion trees in Canada, 48 pounds of CO2 is absorbed by each and every tree every single year in Canada. 318 billion trees multiplied by 48 pounds equals 15 trillion 264 million pounds. So you take that 15 trillion 264 million, divide it by 2,000 because it's per ton. That number equals 7 trillion 632 million. I think Canada needs to get a rebate. That's what I'm thinking. You can do this math yourself because Canada has the most swamps in the world. This country is known for its extensive wetlands, which include numerous swamps and bogs. You can literally do your own homework on this, folks, and find out for yourself exactly what I'm telling you here. That the whole carbon thing that's happening here in Canada can happen in your country. But hey, Canada, like I said earlier, like we're the second largest country in the world. Our land mass is so vast that we have 318 billion trees, swamps, bogs, marshes, and it absorbs CO2. So we're actually absorbing other people's CO2 in this world. It's minuscule amounts of what is in the atmosphere, but with fear mongering from people, they would lead you to believe that it's a different story. Because the media, who's owned by people, they keep forcing a narrative down your throat that they want a feed to you, and you just keep eating it. It's literally that simple. So you just have to wake up a little bit, do a little research. Don't take my word for it. Go do your own. I've always said that as well. These are my opinions, my feelings, but those are the facts. The facts that I just gave you are factual information, scientific factual information, and guess what? Facts don't care about your feelings. They just don't. Facts are facts. It's the way it is. So listen, it's been 27 minutes into this podcast. This is going to be a wrap for me about the carbon tax and about carbon emissions in this country, or in the world for that matter. I'm going to sign off, but before I do, I want to let you know that obviously I am on Rumble, always on Rumble. I am on Spotify. You can also find my audio on any Apple or Android device. Just type in The Surge Affect, and you will see my logo just like that. And it'll take you right there. Thank you very much for subscribing and liking my channel. It is much appreciated. It helps in the algorithm when you subscribe. It helps with the algorithm when you like. And spread the word. Until next time, everyone, thank you very much for tuning in. And until next time, have yourself a great day. Cheers. This episode sponsored by He Shirts, She Shirts. Go to www.heshirtssheshirts.ca. Just type in the letters TSA, The Surge Effect. When you check out, type in TSA for your coupon and receive 10% off your next purchase. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, everybody.